Quadratic Formula. And if you're new to the channel, smash the like button.
Okay, I'm going to show you how to use the quadratic formula to solve quadratics. So we're going to solve this quadratic equation right here. Now, I've shown you in the last video, if there's nothing here, how to solve simple factorable quadratics. This formula will work for anything as long as the solution is possible. So here's how it works. Quadratic formula is written out like this. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a, where a, b, and c are the numbers that are multiplied by x squared, x, and that number by itself, respectively. So in this case, a is 2, b is 9, and c is 4. They could be positive or negative. The only criteria for this to work is that a can't be 0. Now, as you're going to see, sometimes there's not a solution because you can't square root a negative. So if the thing under here, and they call in the books, they call that thing the discriminant. If the thing under here, b squared minus 4ac, happens to be negative, there's no solution. Otherwise, there is. Let me explain this whole plus or minus idea here. What that really means is that we have two formulae, and they are x is equal to negative b plus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a, or in the other possible case, x is equal to negative b minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So when you see this plus with a minus underneath, it's really, understand, it's a shortcut way of just writing out two formulas, one where it's added and the other where it's subtracted. And otherwise, everything is exactly the same. Okay, so let's go back to the question at hand. And the question is 2x squared plus 9x plus 4 is all equal to 0. So I'm now going to identify that that's A, that's B, and that's C. And I'm going to write out that x is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And there's this whole process where you could start out with these letters, and if you complete the square, do a bit of algebra to it, you actually can turn this quite easily into that. And I'll show you that on another video. But for now, I'm just going to show you how to quickly and easily solve quadratic equations. So we're going to plug all those numbers in, giving us x is equal to negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 9 squared minus 4 times 2 times 4 all over 2 times 2. Now notice I'm using a dot for multiply instead of an x, and you're going to find as you transition into algebra from arithmetic, instead of using an x for multiply, you'll often see a dot. It's raised up in the middle as not to be confused for a decimal point, but it's a lot easier because you're going to look at something and ask, is it an x, is it multiply? And then when you get into vectors, there's a thing called cross product, which you then need it. So that just means multiply. So that dot means 2 times 2, that's 4 times 2 times 4. So we have x is equal to negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 9 squared, which is 81, minus 4 times 2, which is 8 times 4, which is 32, all over 2 times 2, which is 4. 81 minus 32 is 49. So we have x is equal to negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 81 minus 32, which is 49, all over 4. Square root of 49 is 7. 7 times 7 is 49. So x is equal to negative 9 plus or minus 7 all over 4. This is where we split this into two. X is equal to negative 9 plus 7 over 4, or x is equal to negative 9 minus 7 over 4. So that plus or minus really means we got two questions, one where it's plus, one where it's minus. Negative 9 plus 7 is negative 2, so this is negative 2 over 4. And over here, negative 9 minus 7 is negative 16, so this is negative 16 over 4, which makes this x is equal to negative 1/2, or x is equal to negative 4. Those are the two solutions to the quadratic equation 2x squared plus 9x plus 4 is equal to 0 by using the quadratic formula. Now a question like this is actually factorable as well, and I'll show you in another video how to factor it, but for the class I'm teaching right now, all you guys need to be able to do is carefully apply this formula. Warning, sometimes if you're trying to do this quickly, you might divide and then multiply because you've learned BEDMAS. Well, if you have a division sign like this, you must add everything on top as if there's brackets around there and then do the division. That's why I combined the negative 9 and the positive 7 to a negative 2 before dividing by 4. You don't try and divide that by one of them first. They're not always going to be such nice clean numbers. I cooked this problem ahead of time to make sure the numbers would work out nice and evenly. So to recap, take your quadratic equation, identify the number times x squared as a, the number that's being multiplied by x is b, and then the number by itself is c. And they go into this formula here. Memorize that formula, drop those numbers in, and just apply your rules of algebra. One little thing to watch for. If b squared minus 4ac happens to be negative, there is no answer. And there's actually an easy visual meaning of that. So if you put in numbers such that b squared minus 4ac was a negative, that would simply mean you have a quadratic that looks like this. The solution is finding where that intersects here along the x-axis. But a quadratic like that does not intersect the x-axis, and the math will show you that. It'll show up with a negative number in there. Also, sometimes there's a 0 here. And plus the square root of 0 is the same thing as minus the square root of 0. It's just nothing. And what that means is your quadratic equation happens to coincidentally look like that, where there is only one intersection point with the x-axis. And in the example that I just showed you, there are two answers. They happen to be negative in that case, so it means your quadratic would look like that. And what you found was this spot and that spot right there.
Yep, and if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe.